You're not gone live. Okay.
Step 3, grow hard about what you want to be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Welcome to Tales from the Field. My name is Bradley Ball, and it is so good to have you with us. Today is a very special presentation that we have. We are joined by Mr. Bradley Schaap, Principal Program Manager from the Fabric Cat team. So wonderful to have you here and have you with us. Also, my colleague Niraj Jafari. I can't say enough great things about Niraj Jafari, but I try to every single day. If we were the Autobots, he is my Optimus Prime. Niraj, Brad, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everybody who's tuning in. We've already got 6 people here off the jump. One of the things that we want to talk about is what we are doing today. We are going to be presenting on some of the great things coming out in Microsoft Fabric that have already come out. We're releasing updates. There was a July update that came out earlier this month. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of those great things. He understands how to be able to use it, and then we're going to do some great demos that we've got put together. But we also want to make sure you understand that this is interactive. This is your time, and we appreciate you spending it with us. So if you have questions about the service, please make sure to comment on the live stream. If you comment on the live stream, one of my amazing co-host Niraj or Brad will see your comment and they will add it to the live stream, and we will make sure to address your questions. As I can see out there, we already have some wonderful people. Our good buddy Dan Taylor, great way to start off Tuesday with my favorite people. Thank you, Dan. We are looking forward to getting going. And again, this is all about you and your time, so we want to make sure that this is very valuable for you. So if there's any questions that you have, anything at all, please feel free to throw it in. Brad, without further ado, I think I'm going to toss it over to you, and I'm going to say, please take it away, and let's start with Fabric introduction.
Sure thing. Here, let me just, I'll click past. We've got, random slides and whatnots here. So thank you, everybody, obviously, for joining. Like Brad said, there's a lot of really cool updates coming into Fabric all the time. But before we jump into that, I want to do a little bit of level setting. We're not going to spend nearly as much time as we normally would on just an intro to Fabric session talking about all the things about the AI landscape and what's going on out there in the market and everything. But I do want to set the stage for some folks maybe who haven't been here before on what Fabric is, why we built it, and show you just how to get started with it. And then we'll jump into all the cool things for the seasoned fabricators out there who have already seen what Fabric is. So we're going to spend maybe just the first 15, 20 minutes or so going through that. But to kick things off here, this is what you see on the screen right now is basically the landscape of the machine learning, artificial intelligence, and data world. There's a lot of stuff up there. And Microsoft is just one small blip on that big chart in somewhere in the little red analytics section of that. And what we realized was that our customers out there who are building these analytics products have the challenge that analytics is complicated, and the environments are really, really difficult to build because there's so many different components that actually go into building these solutions, whether it's figuring out how to get data from on-prem or even in the cloud with just cloud native services, trying to figure out how to connect all those things together. And these architectures that you see on the screen here, these are actual customer architectures that we've anonymized, of course, but these are actual customer architectures. And every single one of those lines and every single one of those boxes represents a challenge for you to be successful with your analytics solution. So there's a lot of different integration points, again, whether that's networking and or security or just getting data between these. It takes some time to do that, latency, or maybe there's an integration tool for that. And so what we said was, hey, look, many years ago, people have looked at this and said there's a predictable pattern to this. We need to bring data in. So there's a data acquisition piece of this. You have to clean the data up. You've got to put it into a data model. And then we might do some data science or BI work on top of that before we ultimately send that out to our users. And underpinning all this is we're going to try to store all this data in the data lake. So you go back to like the maybe 2015 kind of time frame, and the whole modern data analytics or modern data warehouse patterns started to become popular, where we store everything in the data lake and try to keep everything centralized there because storage is cheap and all that. And so we have services at Microsoft for all of these things. We've got Data Factory for the integration. We've got Synapse Spark or Databricks or HD Insight to run Spark. We've got all these different things to do data engineering. We've got Synapse or SQL to do data warehousing, so on and so forth, and ultimately serve that data up with Power BI. But again, the challenge with these is it's a bunch of different products and it's so complex. But we did a first pass at this with Synapse, and we said, hey, let's try to centralize all this stuff into a single location. So with Synapse, we started to integrate these things. We brought Data Factory and the data warehouse together. We brought Power BI and tacked it on to the end of it. So it wasn't quite the seamless experience that everybody wanted, but it was getting a little bit better. And ultimately, this is why we came up with and decided to build Microsoft Fabric. As we said, hey, we want you guys to be able to go build this end-to-end solution, have it be set up in such a way that you can get up and running quickly and easily. And it's going to give you an experience that's focused on what you want to do at any given moment in your development cycle. So you'll see that there's these persona-based experiences, and I'll show you what these look like here in just a moment. But you're going to see these different experiences here, where we say if you're doing data engineering work, we're going to surface just the stuff for Spark. You can still get to all the other things, but we know you're going to want to focus on Spark. If you're doing Power BI, you want to do reporting, we're going to focus on that and still give you the ability to go do all the other stuff, but we're going to make Power BI stuff front and center. Okay. As we move over, there were actually 4 pillars that we built Fabric on. And these are those 4 pillars that we wanted to build that complete analytics platform. We hear from customers all the time that we want it to use an open format. They don't like vendor lock-in. They want to be able to use this data with other platforms and stuff. So we said it has to be lake-centric and open. We want to empower every business user to be successful where they are. And that comes in a few different ways, and that we'll talk about. And for the new world, we want this to be powered by AI as much as possible. So with our analytics platform, one of the big things that we're doing here that you'll see different compared to the other Azure services and Azure offerings is that we've SaaSified the service. So what that means to you at the core is that we're going to be able to roll updates much more quickly and much more agile, and be much more agile about those updates. So we can take feedback and act on it really quickly, get new, and you'll see new features and functionality coming into the entire platform on a monthly basis, which is what we're ultimately going to talk about for the last 2/3 of our session today. Here is all the cool new things that are coming into Fabric.
Well, and Brad, so for those folks that don't know, right, SaaS is software as a service. And one of the key things about that is really that terminology where we're able to say, there's infrastructure as a service, which is what people are used to, having their physicalized server, having their, setting up network cards, being able to install applications, things of that nature. The first level that you abstract from that is PaaS. And that would be what people are familiar with Azure Synapse Analytics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Synapse Analytics, your Azure SQL database, Databricks, all those sort of things, those would be considered your PaaS services. And like you said, SaaS takes that one step further. And now we're not just modifying the backend, but we're also going to take away some of the hard things that you normally have to do. Like we're not going to make you go in there and handle statistics and do backup jobs and all that sort of stuff. We're going to abstract some of the day-to-day heartaches of the platform away from you. Right? I already mentioned some of the lake-centric and open stuff. We'll touch on that a bit more in just a moment. Empowering every business user is really about bringing this service to where you are, whether that's embedding reports inside of Power BI or doing things in the web browser on any platform, any machine type, and then AI powered, as people have probably seen. We got a lot of stuff coming with Copilot and ChatGPT integration and things like that.
That is definitely where the excitement is. There's a lot of great stuff. I was going to say Adam and Patrick just had a wonderful video over on Guyana Cube. Of course, if you're here and you're watching this, you've got to be subscribed to Guy in the Queue. But they did a wonderful one showing how Copilot is a preview component within Power BI Desktop, and you can go and enable it. You can use it for DAX creation. People may be familiar with it with some of the GitHub items that we have, but it's just going to grow and grow, and there's a lot of excitement around that.
Yeah, for sure. There's going to be some really interesting experiences that we're going to be building directly into Fabric as well, in addition to, like you just mentioned, Brad, into the Power BI desktop app. We're going to have Copilot experiences for the entire platform. So if you're somebody that says, I want to learn Spark, but I don't know it yet, Copilot might be a way to get you in the door. Or maybe you're somebody that says, hey, I'm really good at writing PySpark, and I just want to go a little bit faster or have it help me check some code. And we're going to have the ability to do that sort of stuff in there. So there's going to be a lot of really interesting experiences that that we're going to be enabling with Copilot in the coming months. So keep an eye out on that for sure. So I'm not going to belabor all these points here. Again, what we're trying to do is make this as easy as possible for everything to just work for you. So what does Fabric actually look like from an architecture perspective? We've got all these different workloads. This looks very similar probably to the slide we had just a moment ago where we said, hey, we've got all this stuff that's disparate out there in the environment, but now it's got a pretty little box around it. So you might be saying, hey, how is that really any different for me than what we were just talking about? So let's take a look here in a little bit more detail. OneLake is really,
I was going to say, we have a quick comment, Daniel Taylor. The DAX component is really, really cool. Remember, if you don't see it in the Power BI desktop, go to the options, check your preview features, and make sure it is enabled. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, that is a great point. It is a preview feature. You have to have those preview functionalities and capabilities enabled within Power BI desktop to be able to use the Copilot system. Great stuff.
Yep, definitely. Thanks, Dan. So when we talk about OneLake is the piece that underpins everything inside of Fabric. So you're going to see this in action here in just a minute in a couple of places. One, just in our little overview, and then also a little bit of a deep dive a little bit later on in the session here. So what we're doing here is we're essentially taking all of the work that you normally have to do with setting up a bunch of ADLS accounts, Azure Data Lake storage accounts, piecing those together. This is going to handle storing every single artifact that's in there, whether that's data sitting in your data lake in your Lakehouse or inside your data warehouse. Power BI is going to connect on top of that. Everything is going to be stored and managed inside of OneLake. And on top of that, we're adding in a serverless compute layer. So no longer do we have to go spin up an individual Spark engine and a data warehouse engine and provision a data factory, all these different things to be able to work on our end-to-end solution. Now we've turned all those different compute layers into serverless layers. So as you need each one of those different items, we're going to provision them and tear them down automatically for you so that you don't have to worry about managing the compute for each one of those individually. Now, when you combine all these pieces together, what that ultimately means is each one of these engines, whether it's Spark or T-SQL or KQL with real-time analytics, or whether that's Power BI going out and just pulling data off of OneLake to be able to do a report, each one of those engines is going to read and write their data on OneLake in the backend. And what this ultimately means is that I no longer, because all of these will actually read and write on OneLake, that means that if I prepare some data with Spark, I can actually go read that same data set with T-SQL, and I can pull that data into Power BI, all without having to move the data. So there's this whole concept of we want as much as possible to give you one copy of data that can work with all your different compute engines. And in that same vein, the way we're going to do that is we're going to standardize on the Delta format. So everything is stored in Parquet behind the scenes with the Delta log on top of that. Okay.
I agree with Jerry. Sorry, we've got another great comment, Brad. I don't know if you see these or not, but Jerry is really excited about how these engines can interact with data so easily. Agreed, Jerry. This is one of the great things and one of the big promises about Fabric is how easily we can leverage all of this over all of this data at once. Great stuff.
Yeah, it's really, really nice being able to do that. And that's this last concept here, though, that I'll touch on, is the concept of shortcuts. So, as we were saying there, every one of these engines can use this and interact with the data. The easiest way to do that and share that among all these different services even is with shortcuts. So we don't even have to necessarily have all of the data inside of Fabric. If you've got data sitting out there in your ADLS account that you've spent years and years building and curating, then we're going to give you shortcuts to bring that data directly in to OneLake. Okay, so you're not even going to have to move the data, just create a shortcut. Now it appears as though it's part of OneLake and you're good to go. All right. Last topic here before we switch over and just show a little bit of demo and get into the interesting meat of the session for today. Yes, Dan, it is going to be hard to fit your coffee breaks in when everything just goes immediately. I'm sure that will cause many people to miss their coffee breaks.
I hope not. Coffee is like the first essential vitamin of a good morning, right?
That's what they say, but.
So, Brett, you're about to show something, and I am so excited about this, right? Because this is the world that we know. This is like the road so far. We only have these two options for Power BI, where there's a direct query mode and an import mode up until recently. And your options, it was vice versa, right? Direct query mode, it was slow, but it was real time. We could access the data. And we've done a lot of tooling to be able to help things like that in Azure Synapse Analytics. But also we have the import option, which is what people are used to if they've been using tabular analysis services or Azure analysis services or Power BI up to this point in time, when you create a data set, you have a refresh schedule, you import that data, you have to duplicate the data, but once it's there, It's an in-memory resident data set. It's very fast, but you do have that refresh time lag that we have. So it's either we're going to go real time and we really need to architect very, very highly and tightly if we want it to be fast, or if we want to import, we can import, but we've got to understand there's going to be that delay of the refresh actions. And with Fabric, we've got a third option.
Yeah, and we've, like you said, we've done some stuff in each one of these and tried to make this experience a little bit better. We've even introduced things like hybrid models and composite models, where you're able to mix these two together, both at the model and table level, to import some of the data and make some of the data direct query. But with Fabric, we don't have to worry about all that stuff, because now we've got this new mode called direct lake mode. And it essentially gives you the best of both of those worlds. So we get the speed that you mentioned and the latency, or lack thereof, that you get with direct query. So you get your data really, really quick. It's always up to date, but you get the performance that we get out of import mode. So you really do get the best of both worlds with this. Now, I'll go ahead and say it. There's a little bit of marketing on there in the perfect terminology. Because marketing does put these decks together, for being honest. But it is a very impressive piece of technology that we've come up with to be able to combine these two together and really reduce the data latency, but give you great performance. Now, it will. The question inevitably comes up. What are my limits around this? How big can my data set be? Does that mean everything can go into this? And there are, today anyway, there are some limitations on what will actually work in direct lake mode versus direct query mode. But the really cool thing about this, and I think Patrick did a video about this not too long ago on Guy in a Cube, but he was showing how you actually tell whether or not your model is using direct lake mode or whether it's using direct query mode. And the nice thing about it is the model will actually seamlessly fall back to direct query mode if there's ever any problems with trying to satisfy the query over direct lake. So you don't have to worry about architecting your model in such a way that that makes sure that you take all these things into account. We really have gone through a lot of work to make sure that it's as seamless for all of our end users as possible to get that really great performance out of direct lake mode.
That's very exciting. Because if you think about that is essentially built-in high availability that you have to be able to transition between one reporting data source and another. That's really big stuff. Yeah,
for sure. There's some new stuff coming. We've announced this, but we haven't done a whole lot about it. Maybe we'll do a session here coming up in one of the update sessions here in the next few months about Data Activator. But this is really designed, Data Activator is really designed to help you know when changes happen so that you can go make real-time decisions on top of your data. So we'll get into Data Activator on another session. But with that,
maybe we do that next month, because I think that that's a very exciting thing. We've seen it in graphics. It's been advertised out there, but I think people definitely want to see a good demo of how to be able to utilize that. But it's really neat because once you understand what it does, I mean, essentially it's going to allow you to put alerts on KPIs and on other measures that you have within a Power BI report. And if you think about it, you could have different types of jobs that fire alerts in a SQL Server instance. This is going to allow you to do it on your reporting metrics. So more to come on that, but that's going to be a really neat one.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So with that is Fabric. Let me jump in. We'll show just a quick demo end to end here of the Fabric experience, and then we'll jump into some of the updates that Brad and I have prepared to show you guys today. So just getting started here, if you head over to just fabric.microsoft.com, get logged in, you're going to end up landing on an experience page that gives you a bunch of different options for how. Actually, let me see if I can show it to you real quick. Oh, actually, no. Stop pulling up in the other browser window there, but it'll give you a landing page here that essentially, here it goes, that shows you all the different experiences that we have that we just talked about. So if you're a Power BI person, click Power BI, and you'll go into the screen that you're used to. If you're a data warehouse person, you click Data Warehouse, and then up here at the top of the screen, it shows you a bunch of stuff that's specific to your data warehouse experience. Again, we're trying to surface this stuff that's most relevant to what you're trying to do, but you'll see in a second we can still get to everything else. So what I'm going to do to get us started here, I'm going to go to Workspaces. I'm going to click New Workspace, and I'm just going to call this TF. So Tales from the Field for my workspace name. And under the advanced section here, I'm going to select trial because I want to make sure that we've got some capacity behind this. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But anybody out there right now, because Fabric is in preview at this point in time, everybody out there today will be able to use the trial capacity, and you'll be able to do everything that you're going to see in today's session. So we'll pick our trial, we'll click apply, and then here in just a couple of seconds, we have our workspace spun up. Now, up here in the top left corner, I've got all these different things that I can create as well as show all. So I mentioned that we try to surface as much relevant information as possible, but you can still get to everything that Fabric has to offer by just clicking on that show all button. To start though, what we're going to do is we're going to create a lakehouse. And I'm going to call this Wide World Importers, LH for Wide World Importers Lakehouse. Click create. And I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is to get data into our lakehouse and be able to query it. Okay? So just like that, we have our lakehouse up and running. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see that I've got a files and a table section. The files is going to be kind of that messy, unstructured section that, as the name would suggest, is files. You can store anything here, whether that's a CSV or a Parquet file. You can store a SQL Server backup if you wanted to. You can store video, text files, PDFs, whatever. This will store any files. This is purely just Azure Data Lake storage behind the scenes. Okay, so where we're at right now, this would be the equivalent of you going into your Azure subscription, creating a workspace, creating an ADLS account, and then putting some sort of Spark compute on top of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give us a little bit of structure here, and I'm going to call this folder upload. Okay. Now, in my upload folder, I'm going to right click and I'm going to, as we would suggest, upload a couple of files. I'm going to go browse for these over on my C drive, and I'm going to grab just the sale. I'm just going to grab a couple of files here and upload those. Okay. And if I click on my upload, you'll see that I've now got those files loaded up. So I didn't have to open up Storage Explorer or anything like that. All my files are just here inside the browser. Now, how do I actually take action on these files? How do I actually be able to query these? Because this is great. Yeah, I can put data out there in Fabric. But if I want to actually take advantage of all those other things we just talked about, then what do we do? Well, the first thing we're going to say is I want to be able to query this data with T-SQL. Okay, because I'm a SQL person. Brad, I know you're a SQL person too, so we like to be able to explore our data with T-SQL. So the way that we're going to do that is I can right click on this file and I can just say load to tables, new table, give it a name. In this case, sale works great. I'm going to click load. And that's what it's going to do is actually move that data over here into this table section, put a Delta log on top of it, and turn this into a table that we can now go query with our SQL engine. Okay, so no code written whatsoever here to have to do this. And while we're here, I'm going to show you one other neat improvement that we just landed here into Fabric in the last month or so. Is prior to this session, if we were doing this, I would have said that you either have to drag and drop this one file individually onto tables, or you have to right click on this one file and say that you want to load it to a table. Well, there's actually two things I'll show you. One is that we can now load to an existing table. So if you have some extra data out here, you say, I just want to add this to an existing table. You can either say, I want to append this data or I want to overwrite everything that's inside there. So that's super duper helpful for everybody. That was one of the top requests that I got whenever I would do these sessions is, all right, well, what if I already have a table or what if I want to add data to an existing table? Now you don't have to go to Spark. You can just do it all right here through the GUI. The other thing that we added is if I right click on a folder level and I go to load to tables, you'll see that I now get the option, I get some more options inside of here. And I can say, I either want to load CSV or Parquet files, so it doesn't just have to be Parquet anymore. And I can say, I have column headers in my first row, comma separator, and I can include subfolders. So again, before it was, I had to do this on an individual file. And the most requested thing that I got whenever doing this was, okay, well, what if I have a file full of a bunch of, a folder full of a bunch of files that I want to turn into a table? I can't do that individually. Well, now you can because you can append. And now you don't even have to append it. You can just do it at the entire table level or at the entire folder level. And it'll convert everything in there. So two really, really nice updates to this whole experience just in the last month or so. But now that table has been created, what we'll do, just to wrap this section up, and then Brad will pass it over to you, is how we actually query this and take action. So I've got this Lakehouse, again, unstructured section. I've got my table section up here. If I just switch this over to the SQL endpoint, I can now come over here and you'll see that I get an Object Explorer on the left-hand side of the screen. I'll get a preview of my data over here on the right side. And I can come down here at the bottom and I can go ahead and click query, and I can start writing my normal T-SQL queries out here.
Look at that beautiful built-in intelligence too. I mean, I remember a point in time when prior to working at Microsoft, where we had to pay good money to be able to purchase third-party tools that would plug in just to give us that level of intelligence. I love it that it's in all the tools nowadays, but how wonderful.
Well, and that's just one of the many things that we're trying to do to make the browser-based experience great for everybody. So we get a lot of requests all the time to say, hey, I don't want to have to go install these other tools and stuff. So it's really nice to see the team actually taking that to heart and, like you said, building good intelligence into the browser so we don't have to go necessarily to a third-party tool. Now, looking at this from my perspective as somebody just getting up and running, this is great for a low code, no code type experience here. I don't have to do a whole lot. I can drag and drop. One last thing I'll show you here actually is if you are a code first person, I'll show you this. If we go back to our Lakehouse view, I can do a new notebook here. And this is our Spark experience. I want to show you this just because it's so fast. Because, Dan earlier said that he's lamenting the fact that he can't get his coffee. And so,
yeah, and we all know how important the coffee is.
Exactly. So if Dan was having heartache about that before, this isn't going to help that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at these files that I've got.
Hold on a second. I just want to slow this down a second. Because this is beautiful, right? Look at this code that was just created. It's literally df data frame equals spark.read.format, and then you've got a CSV, and then it's got the fully qualified path to the file in our current OneLake. Yep. All you had to do was take the file and drag it over to the window. So you didn't have to write any of that. It was drag and drop. I mean, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And So drag and drop the whole thing. Doesn't matter whether it's a CSV file before, this one's Parquet, you know, it figures out the format. If you do this with JSON as well, it'll do the same thing. Yeah, it's really nice not having, because I don't know the exact location that I need to type in to make this all work properly. So it's super, super helpful to be able to do that.
Oh, that's right. And it's in the GUI. We could find it, but instead of making us
Yeah.
go and look and find it, it's right there.
Yeah. And yes, I don't know that I 100% agree with Dan, but you know, some DBAs might be able to learn Spark.
Oh, come on! Don't hate the player, hate the game. I was going to say, as a DBA, I have had a lot of fun with Spark. It's a really, really cool thing. But yeah, I mean, just the capability, how accessible this makes it, right? Because if you run this and you get a data frame, and I know we did Data Wrangler last time around, but one of the things you could show is the second this reads it in, and we actually have a data frame. Now, it's a slight code conversion to convert it over to Python, because you can't load a Spark data frame in Data Wrangler just yet, right?
Yeah.
We still have to convert it to a Python data frame. But if we convert it to a Python data frame, and we actually have a video up on Tales from the Field where I walk through how to do that. It is the Data Wrangler video that we have. And we will find that, and we will make sure and throw that into the comments. But if you look for that, it's just a one-line section of code to where you take a data frame, a Spark data frame, convert it to Python, or vice versa. If you have a Python data frame and you want to write it out to a file or to a table, it needs to be written as a Spark data frame. So there's some interoperability there, but it's very easy to go back and forth. Once it's a Pandas data frame, the Python data frame, you can open up Data Wrangler, and we can use that beautiful GUI tool with Data Wrangler.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so, Brad, I don't know if you caught this, but that whole session there, while you were talking, I hit run on that. That whole thing took 12 seconds to run. So you'll notice Spark session started in 8.5 seconds there. So I would say that this is the part in something like Azure Synapse Analytics where you start your session. That's your go get a coffee. You can probably even make some toast for breakfast at the same time, and then come back and get your code ready before the session starts. You don't have that option here because we use something called live pools in the background. So what we have is we've got a bunch of sessions already running, or Spark pools already running. So we can just attach that and let you get running right away. So you don't have to worry about all that 5, 10, 15 minute startup time on your pools. We just do it automatically. Click the button and you're off to the races. So, and then there's that data frame that you were mentioning. Very last thing I'll show here is if we come down at the bottom, we can even take that. We'll do df.write, .format. We'll tell it that we want to do this in Delta. And then we'll say that we want to save it to table/customer. And so I'll go ahead and run this. This will be the last line of code that we execute here. And then we'll just refresh over here and writing the data out into my tables section. If you are a code first person and you say, hey, I want to use Python, I want to use Scala, I want to build my notebooks, I want to do this with code, I want that drag and drop stuff, then we've got that option for you here as well. And it's again, this is all great. It's nice to be able to do this in the browser. But Brad, I know for me, coming from the Synapse, or coming from a SQL background, doing BI work and everything, I like my tools. I like Data Studio a lot. I like being able to open things in VS Code. We happen to have a button here. So yeah, huge, much faster than Synapse here. But Brad, I'll pass it over to you. Tell me a little bit, how can I take this and actually use this someplace else? So I'm not just stuck in the browser of somebody that wants to do other things.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Let me hide this. And I'm just going to throw us on the bottom of the screen so we can do some of these comments, because the first thing that I want to show folks is I want to show how easy, hold on a second, let me get away from this. I'm going to get rid of my taskbar so that way we've got the full screen going. One of the things I want people to see is I want them to see how easy it is for us to be able to use other tools that we've got. So if I come over here and I'm in my workspace already, and in this workspace, what I'm looking at is I need to be able to find a couple different things. So I'm going to start off by showing you how we can connect to our warehouse. This is my warehouse right here. And if I click open, you'll notice there's this little thing right here, copy SQL connection string. And all I have to do is click on this. It opens up a button. And then what I can do is I can open up a tool like SSMS. I can connect to the database engine. I'm going to change this over to my Windows authentication, and I may have to do some two-factor authentication. Let me move that over to another screen.
Have to make sure we're secure, of course.
Absolutely. Let's see. All right. Punching in the secret passcode, the super secret passcode, which is partially my face. And now I've connected to this. Now, here's the really cool thing. What you can see is I've got my database, but look at this. I've also got my Lakehouse right here. And that's because the SQL endpoint that we have for our Lakehouse is the same SQL endpoint that we're using here. So if you want to use SSMS, now I first got this by going over to my warehouse, right? But I could have very easily come over to my Lakehouse, and I could have gone to the SQL endpoint, and I could have gotten the copy SQL connection string from here. But the wonderful thing is it's the same tool, right? So, hold on a sec. Let me get rid of that. And so once I'm in here, I can see the different tables that I have that are accessible. And I did not mean to open up that. So let me see if I need to kill that, because it looks like I'm going to keep getting alerts. That's wonderful that people are following me. And task. There we go. Hopefully that goes away. I was going to say the my goodness. Okay. Well, that was a mistake. Clearly, I'm just going to ignore those alerts for the time being. But as you can see, now I'm connected to my data warehouse, and I can say something like select star, and let's do a count from DBO baseball rosters. When I run this, it's going to connect over to my Fabric workspace. It's going to connect to the data warehouse in my Fabric instance. Apparently, I have no data in my baseball rosters, so let me pick another table. I was cleaning this up recently. Dim date.
Did you just do delete from to clean up all your data?
Well, actually, I was going to re-import all the baseball data, but that's not part of the demos that we're running today. And so I'm working on a thing behind the scenes where we're going to do a series of videos on how people can actually import the baseball data set, because we've been using that for a couple different things. It's from retrosheets.org. They are a free organization, a nonprofit. If you're interested in free data sets, you should donate to them. But out of a labor of love, they enter all the baseball information, play-by-play for every game as a major league season occurs. And so it gives you all the play-by-play stats, a whole bunch of other fun stuff that we can play around with. But we're working on that. So I was getting rid of all of this so I could work on that. But enough about that. As you can see, I'm connected. I could also connect to my Lakehouse tables that I have. And I could run some of the same queries over there, because all I have to do is change the context, or I could even just say use baseball Lakehouse, because the syntax is there to make it very easily. So I could do this. But let's say you're not an SSMS person, right? Because Brad, you're hip, you're young, you're with it.
That's right.
You like the newest and latest, greatest things. Well, I could come over to my Lakehouse. Oh, that's mine.
Just so everybody knows, hip is usually the word that I hear most often to describe me.
It really is, right? Well, it's what I use. Brad is my cool friend. So you'll notice if I went to my Lakehouse, if I clicked on this, here's my copy SQL connection string, but I could also immediately open this with Azure Data Studio. Now, if I click on Azure Data Studio, I'm going to click open. It's going to tell me to download the newest version, but I've already got the newest, latest, and greatest version, so I don't need to click on this. What I just need to do is I need to drag over my Azure Data Studio. Now, what you'll notice is This is going to connect, but it's going to connect with a context specifically going to the database, to the Lakehouse section. And the Lakehouse only has one database. So if I connect to this, when this connects, you're going to see it will list all the databases, but I'm not really able to go in here and click use if I do a new query. I'm going to be sitting in my baseball lake house. So what I would like to do is I would like to change the way that we're going to connect. I'm going to do this kind of more like a first class citizen. So I'm going to disconnect from here. You can see I've got this nice little Microsoft Fabric thing with a nice little fabric green over here. I'm going to add a connection. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to here. Let's get rid of this and come back over to our Power BI workspace. I'm going to come back to the Lakehouse to the SQL endpoint. I'm going to get to my
workspace.
Well, my Power BI workspace, right? But I mean, why not call it a Fabric workspace? Fabric all the things, right?
Exactly.
I'm going to put that in as my server. I've got my connection. I'm not going to put a default database in here. I'm going to add it to my server group of Microsoft Fabric. And if I didn't have that, I could create a new. I could create a new group, but I've already got my Fabric one here. I'm going to click connect. This will authenticate me. I've got all my databases, and then just as easily, I can come in here and I can say, here are my new notebooks. I could add code. Let's see, select are from sys.tables, run, and this will run against the system, and I can see there's my different tables that I have. So what did we do last time? We did dim customers, so I could do dim date. And just like SQL, I ignored the schema. That's lazy, though. For the query optimizer, I should have the schema in there, but it returned everything just fine. But here I am in a notebook in Azure Data Studio, right? So I could create a notebook in Azure Data Studio, run this against my Lakehouse, run this against my SQL instance.
So
but
real quick, Fred, I just want to say, for those who haven't used notebooks in Data Studio, that is one of the most interesting and cool things inside of there. It's especially if you do presentations or demos, or you're just trying to walk through and like troubleshoot code, being able to work in the notebook style is very, very helpful. And if it's not something that you've taken a look at before, I would highly recommend you go out there and check that out. And then just kind of broadly speaking, up until probably about a year ago, I was very anti-Azure Data Studio. I was very much on the I'm an SSMS guy, but then I got cool and hip and started using Data Studio. And
you are my cool and hip friend.
Exactly. But I gotta say, if you haven't taken a look at Data Studio in a while, go out there and give it a shot. Just use it for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and try making the shift over there. There's a ton of work going into there. They update Data Studio every single month. And it's come a long way in the last couple of years since we launched that. But that's my pitch. I like Data Studio a lot. I love the notebook stuff. Go try it out.
I agree. It's a really amazing tool. It's coming a long way. That group is doing a lot of work on it. And as Dan Taylor said, so popular. The one thing I was zooming in on here, Brad, was if we look at this kernel, this is the only place where you've got a T-SQL kernel, right? In a Jupyter Notebook, you don't even have the capability to do just regular T-SQL. It's Spark SQL, it's PySpark, it's going to be, Scala, R. This is the place where you can actually take and build a notebook that you can exchange with other people you're working at. You can have visualizations, you can have text instructions, run these things, look for these result sets. Really, really cool and great stuff with Azure Data Studio. But speaking of cool tools that don't get enough love, I'm going to talk next about Kusto Data Explorer. Kusto Data Explorer allows us to be able to connect to a Kusto cluster. Now, if I've already got one set up in my workspace over here, my Power BI workspace, but I like to call it my Fabric workspace. If I come into my KQL database, though, one of the things that I can do is when this loads up, I will be able to see all the information about my KQL database. And we're going to use this more than once. I've got another demo in a little while where we're going to use this again. But right here, this query URI, right? this query URI, I can copy this, and this has my cluster information on it. And so what I can do now is I can come back over to my Kusto workspace, and I can say, let's add a connection. I can set my Kusto cluster, my alias, click OK. And you can see right over here, this is going to expand. There's my cluster. Now you can put a friendly name in that. I'm not going to waste the time and do that, but there's my IISDB. Now we're going to recreate this demo a little bit later, but I've got IIS location and I've got astronauts. And what I can do is I can start to run some queries against this. So I'm just going to run a couple real quick. Let me copy them over. The first thing I wanted to know, so Brad, did you know that you can run T-SQL and KQL? So for example, if I said select top 1,000 rows from ISS_loc, I just hit F5. Oh, I've got to select a database. So let me rerun that. Now that I've got this run, if you look at this, I mean, that was T-SQL, right? That wasn't KQL.
So I don't have to learn KQL to be able to query Kusto, is what you're telling me?
You absolutely, you really don't. And like, again, if you did want to learn KQL, if you went, hey, I'd like to understand the way that KQL is formatted, we could take this exact same statement and I could say explain. And once I put the explain statement in and hit F5, it will actually give me a statement in KQL that I could then run to be able to get the exact same information. So you've got multiple choices, right? So here we have this incredibly powerful database that can auto scale up, auto scale down, can literally have thousands of cores accessible to it, runs on solid state. Everything is in columnar. You could have streaming JSON data going to this, which we're going to show in a little while. This very, very powerful database. And I can run T-SQL against it. I can run KQL. I can convert T-SQL to KQL in a second. I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff right there.
Pretty impressive. Yeah.
So, Dan's got a question. Brad, when do you recommend using the KQL cluster? Any use cases that would help us know when to use KQL databases? So, Dan, absolutely. One of the key things I would look at is if you have logged or time series type of event-based data, or if you have a lot of data sitting on physical disks that you've imported that might not be real-time data, could be some historical data sitting in a different type of format, you could create an external table just like you can with a data warehouse. And you could pull in a massive amount of data if you need to run queries in Power BI. But the most of the time where people are going to use this 99% of the time is for that live event streaming data, because we can stream data directly in there. We can query it at the same time. It will store it in a format. And this is proprietary to the KQL databases that run in Microsoft Fabric. But when we provision it, one of the things we'll say is make sure that this storage is running in OneLake. And if the data is in OneLake, I can have real-time reports running against it and updating to be able to get real-time reporting using, what was that wonderful thing that Brad Chat showed us earlier, Direct Lake. So it's, that's the number one place I see people using this. Brad, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in with any 2 cents on that.
No, you covered it. The time series is that big one. There's also a few things like with geospatial data that we don't do inside of like the data warehouse today that you can do really, really easily inside of Kusto. So that's another kind of lesser used functionality for it. But there's some cool stuff in there around that as well.
Very nice. Well, so that's not all, right? Let's go to another service that we can use with this. And Brad, this one might surprise you. This is our good friend Buck Woody's favorite tool, Microsoft Excel. So Microsoft Excel, I know,
Buck's
right?
Favorite tool is Excel.
I'm pretty sure. We've established that if it's the number one database used in the world. But besides that point, we have a ton of business users out there, right? The business users are used to doing things in Excel. So if you go over to the data pane, you say get data. Now this is interesting, right? Because you got to go from database and you can say SQL Server. When this pops up, what I will do is I'm going to head right back over to my Microsoft Fabric. I'm going to head to the workspace. I'm going to go back to my warehouse just to make sure I've got it in the cache. I'm going to say copy SQL connection string, because the last thing I had was my KQL connection string. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, here's the server. Now for the database, I'm going to say baseball. And we do have advanced options, just like anything else. Command timeout, I could use T-SQL. But if I use this, I connect. It's going to, once again, just like the things that we typically see that we're very used to at this point in time, we've got Power Query. Let me pull in dim customer. Now, as you know, I could transform my data through the power of Power Query and then load it. I'm just going to straight up load this. But if I wanted to, I've now got my data from my database sitting in my Microsoft Excel. So I could utilize this to be able to use any methodology that I want to be able to use to work with this data, produce some of those business reports that we've got for end users. So for our business users that are used to being able to get data from a data source, this is an incredibly powerful use case. And then last but certainly not least, and I just realized I didn't have this loaded, so sometimes this takes a minute to open up. But there it is, our good friend, Mr. Power BI. So obviously I need to sign in. Let's continue. I'm not going to go through making a report for you right now, but there's a couple things I want to point out. First is our OneLake hub. Brad already showed us a little bit about how we could use those files so quickly and so easily in Lakehouse. Well, if you've got OneLake installed, you could drag files up from your computer to be able to be within your Fabric workspace. Also, if you wanted to access data that's already in your OneLake hub, you could go there from Power BI. If I say get data, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that Fabric is a first-class citizen here. We've got our Fabric preview, and I have Power BI data sets, data flows, data marts, warehouses, lakehouses, KQL databases, all that I could connect to be able to ingest my data directly into Power BI. Now, this full developer experience from a Power BI report user perspective is also in the browser. Brad talked about this a little bit, but being in the browser, that makes this instantaneously compatible with any platform that runs a browser, which means you can access this on a Mac, which I know business users have been asking for a long time. You can access that functionality in Microsoft Fabric by authoring Power BI reports using that Power BI report builder point of view, but you could use it fully in a browser. This is in our desktop, of course. And again, I'm not going to build right now, but I thought this was a really, really cool start to be able to show, here's some of the different tools and the power that we have to be able to use the tool that we want to use to connect to Fabric, not just the workspace. And the workspace is incredibly powerful, but really, I love it that you can bring your own tool from this perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
And Josh Lindemann had a comment. I'm not sure if I missed this being said already, but OneLake to me is the quiet, giant, game-changing feature in Fabric that many people are missing and not talking about enough. I completely agree with that, Josh. That's a great statement. OneLake is the foundation that everything is built upon for Microsoft Fabric. Really, really key for us to understand that Microsoft Fabric OneLake is what connects everything together. I saw Dan had a question. Brad, would you recommend using any KQL clusters, any use cases? Sorry, we already did that one.
Yep.
My apologies. Thanks for that question, Dan, but we did answer that one a little bit earlier. All right, so up next.
Yeah, so I think the next thing I'll actually kind of get into some of the stuff Josh was mentioning there, with OneLake being the quiet giant, and it really is. I mean, nobody really talks about OneLake. It just kind of exists there behind the scenes. It's one of those things that's crazy important to everything that we do in Fabric, but not necessarily something that gets a whole lot of press. But if we throw my screen up, I'll show you something that's really, really cool here that we can do. So earlier in the session, you saw we created our workspace, we created our Lakehouse. And what I also have inside this workspace is a data warehouse. Okay, so we're not going to get into all the Lakehouse versus warehouse, all that kind of stuff. But what I have over here is I've got my item table. If you remember in our Lakehouse, if we switch over to our Lakehouse view, in our Lakehouse, switch here, we have the sale table and the customer table. So I've got my data sitting in both places right now. And sure, we can go out, we can run a T-SQL query, and we can query between the two. That's all well and good. But we also have this other thing that's really cool called shortcuts. And we mentioned this a little bit up at the very top, but if I right click here on this table section and I do a new shortcut, what I can actually do is, leveraging the power of OneLake, is because all my data is already stored out there, I can say, go out here into my TF workspace, grab that wide world importers DW database that we were just looking at 1 second ago, and I can browse the list of tables. In this case, I've only got item in there, but we'll grab that one. We'll say create, and it's going to now create a shortcut. It's a little hard to see, but what you see there is there's a little chain link on there instead of the delta symbol that signifies these other ones are delta tables. Now, what that does for me is it says, hey, that data is sitting out there on OneLake over inside my data warehouse, but I want to create a shortcut to that data here inside my Lakehouse. So now, without having to move the data, without having to copy the data or anything, this item table is now available for me to do anything inside of my my Lakehouse that I would normally do. So I can actually switch over to my SQL endpoint here, and I can come into my Lakehouse, this page, there we go. I'll come over here to my query, and you'll see it shows up in here now, and I'll actually be able to run this query. Okay. And so I just ran this query. You'll notice there's no references in this over to my warehouse or anything like that. It says, hey, that table is here inside my Lakehouse. Treat it as though it's inside my Lakehouse. Run the query as though that table is inside my Lakehouse. But any changes to the data that occur over on the warehouse side are automatically going to be taken into account here. So if I add a bunch of items into the table, those will be added in. The last thing I'll show you here that's really cool is if I go back into my Lakehouse and I say, you know what, let's do a new notebook. Not only can I access that data with T-SQL, but again, because of OneLake and one copy of this data, I can actually now take that same item table, drop it into a data frame, hit my run button here, and now I'm using my T-SQL managed table that I've built over inside of my warehouse that maybe I'm loading with the data flow, maybe I'm loading it with the, loading some data up with a copy activity inside of a pipeline, and that I'm ultimately modifying and doing my type 2 updates potentially with T-SQL, doing all that stuff over on the SQL side. And just as a byproduct of that, now with that shortcut, I get the ability to also use all of that data right here inside of my Spark notebook without having to ever make a copy of that data or move it. So shortcuts at the table level here between Lakehouse and Warehouse are really, really cool. Enables a lot of interesting new use cases that could ultimately come out of that.
So Brad, I love that. And what I want to do next, though, is we've talked about a lot about data that we've already got up in Fabric, right? But how do we get some data up in Fabric? And so one of the things that I want to look at is I've got a local SQL Server 2022 instance. I'm going to connect to it real quick. Let's see, Windows Authentication. There we go.
Dan mentioned, he said, being able to query across the solution was one of the #1 requests in Azure Synapse Analytics workspace. And yes, it does make all the fabricators very, very happy.
I got to tell you, every time I hear fabricators, I want to say your prayers, eat your vitamins. I need a fabricator's T-shirt and probably a headband, preferably not the male pattern baldness. But I definitely, I think we're going to have to make that happen. I love that this has become the name, the fabricators. Great stuff, Dan. You're absolutely right. So Brad, let's talk about how we get data actually up into Fabric from on-prem. So I've got an on-prem SQL 2022 instance. And now, to be fair, this could be any instance. This could be any version of SQL that is currently out there and supported. I've got my worldwide importers, and I've got the data warehouse, and I've got a whole bunch of different tables in here. We're not going to do a ton, but what I want to show is how we get this up there. Now, the first thing you have to do is you have to download and install the on-premise data gateway. And make sure that there is connectivity between the instance that hosts the data gateway, and there is support and connectivity to the SQL Server instance. So you need to make sure that that's there, because your data gateway is going to be the methodology that we use to be able to access this. So if I come back over to my Fabric workspace, I'm sorry, my Power BI workspace, which I also want to call my Fabric workspace, and I go into settings, one of the things I've done is under Manage Gateways and Connections, I've already got my on-premise gateway created. Now, if I didn't, I could come in here, I could say new, I could say on-premise. I would enter my cluster name. I would enter the name. I've already got this. So that's, let's see, August demo, connection type. We've got, and as you can see, there's a lot of different connection types that we have out here. I'm looking specifically for SQL Server. And then I would enter the server, the database name. I would select the authentication mechanism. Now, I already have this connection, so I'm not going to create a new one. I'm going to discard those changes, but we can see here is my gateway. One quick note, I am on the August gateway update, so you want to make sure that that update is there. If you're already familiar with using data gateways for your Power BI reports, then you're going to be very used to this. So I'm going to head back over to my workspace. And in my workspace, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new data flow Gen 2. Now, with this new data flow, I'm going to go get data from another source. I'm going to click on this. And right up here, you can see we've got our old friend SQL Server, but we've also got a lot of different options, right? So one of the things to keep in mind is we do have options outside of SQL Server for this. Now I'm going to say Avengers Tower, because why wouldn't I name my tower like that? It's a pretty massive tower to begin with. And then my database name is Wide World Orders, EW. Oh, I spelled something wrong here. Let me double check. Leave it to the dyslexic guy to spell things wrong, right? So hold on, let me pop this in. Okay, so I must have spelled something wrong with the database name, because the second I do this, it picks up this connection that we've already created with the data gateway. I'm going to click next. Now this is connecting on-prem to my SQL Server right now. And once it gets a list of tables, I can come in, I can select them. I can even say select related tables. I'm just going to pull dimension customer. I'm going to say create. Now there's a couple things to keep in mind. This is essentially the Power Query option that we've got right here. I'm going to make a change. I'm going to make this dim customer. But as you can see, I've got some friendly naming conventions within these. But let's say I wanted to change that. Well, I could very easily go in here and make this customer key. Now, I'm not going to take you through every single column to be able to do that, but you can see over here, we've got our applied steps. So these data flow Gen 2s are essentially allowing us to have the capability of Power Query, but with Spark as a back end to be able to do some of these transformations and pull this data in. So I've got my data destination. I'm going to say I want this to go to my warehouse.
Now, Brad, I think a month or two ago when we did this, warehouse wasn't even an option on there. So that's actually something that's actually come in fairly recently. You used to just be able to drop this into a Lakehouse or to a KQL database. So those warehouse people out there, your destination has arrived.
Absolutely. And here's the great thing, right? This is within the last month. So if you've been using this within the mid-July, late July timeframe, this was one of those big updates that we had. And it's a very exciting update because it means I can take my data from SQL Server and I can push it directly into my data warehouse. I realized, Brad, that I already have a dim customer there. So I changed this table name to dim customer 2, but I could also change it right here. I'm going to go into, now here's the neat thing, right? I've got multiple different workspaces here. These are all different ones that I've got access to. So I could load this data into any of these different workspaces, but I'm going to go to our baseball database because that's what we've been using. And I'm going to click next. it's going to validate this. Now, here's the really cool part, right? I could say I'm appending data to an existing table. I'm replacing data. So we can set this up so we could do an incremental refresh. I've also got source type, the destination that we're going to. And then you'll notice we've got some different keys right here. Now, this is not supported at this point in time, but these are these different foreign keys or different key identifiers that we have within SQL. These do not come in at this point in time, but the fact that we even registered these is huge. Could also mean something for the future. I don't know, but it's there, and it's very interesting that we get to see these things. So I'm good to go with these columns the way they are. I'm going to click Save These Settings, and then I'm going to come down here to the bottom. I'm going to click Publish. This is going to publish up. And let's see, let me sort this by type so I can see it. And you'll notice here's my data flow Gen 3. We can see that it's working and it's beginning to process right here. Now, if I come into these little 3-dot ellipses, one of the things you can see is you can export the JSON for this specifically. So if you wanted to get the JSON that actually makes up the code underneath the covers for your data flow, you can get this. You'll also notice that we have our refresh history, which is really, really key. We're going to look at this in a little while after this runs. And then we've also got a view lineage. So the view lineage, that's the power of Purview that's already integrated. That allows us to be able to see, hey, where are we connecting to these different sources? As we discover them, incredibly helpful for us to be able to look at the Purview view of this as well. So that way we understand if I build a report off of this data, it's going to have those connections so I can understand where all of my data connects. This is a really big thing that is part of Purview that many corporations ask for, many large enterprises needed. And it's just really great that we've got this. So I can see here's my refresh history. Let's just go take a look at this real quick. And what I'm going to find is that this is still in progress. So while we're waiting for this to run, let me come over here real quick. And what we can do is we can go into settings. Now for the settings, you can see where the gateway is. You can see where the refresh is. You can put on a sensitivity label. So you can see there's options. If I wanted to configure a refresh strategy and what it is, I could set this data flow to where we're looking at it and we have the capability to be able to increment this data. And again, that's where that append option was really, really important. Oh, so let me come back over here and let's look at this. And it looks like you can see I could always schedule a refresh right there as well. I believe this has, general. Hold on, where am I trying to click to? I'm trying to get to the history. Let's see, view refresh history. Okay, so this took about 47 seconds. And again, I've got this set up as a server sitting in my office. So this came down over the internet, connected to my server, went through my PowerBI gateway to be able to get this data up. Took about 41 seconds. I can see the information about this and that it succeeded. But more importantly, what I can do is I can come over to my baseball data warehouse. And when this loads, what we should see is that there is a dimension customer 2 table. Oh, I might need to do a refresh. And maybe I missed it if I picked the wrong data warehouse.
Well, while that's refreshing,
oh, there it is.
Did you notice whenever you hit the refresh, there's a little spinny circle that came up next to that? One of the interesting things that we're working on doing here inside the web browser is when you start running DDL operations inside the browser there, it's going to automatically detect that you're running a DDL operation, and it's going to refresh the browser, the Object Explorer for you automatically. So you don't have to run something to create a table, then go over and refresh. We want to try to make that so that you don't even have to worry about that. It just automatically happens. So
that is
just something interesting that we're working on right now.
I love it. I love it. Well, and speaking of things that I love it that my Dimension Customer 2 is already there. You can see there's a preview of my data. But we've got this. So I have literally just in very simple and short order, I have pulled data from my on-premise SQL 2022 instance to be able to use up in Microsoft Fabric. So that way I can get this. Now I could use this on a VM. I could use this with on-premise data. So for people who are going, hey, how do we get our data into Microsoft Fabric? And you can see there was a whole host of data sources within that data gateway that we set up. This is how you do this. This is how you get that data into Fabric right now so you can begin utilizing it as you're working on different POCs and things of that nature. So Brad, do you want me to share your screen? Because I think you're up next, right?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. I'm just going to show one thing here real quick before we take a look at some real-time analytics stuff that's really interesting. Something new that we just added recently is the ability to share a data warehouse. So up to this point, if I wanted to give Brad or Niraj access to my data warehouse, I'd have to give them access to the entire workspace here. But what I can do now is inside my workspace, come find my warehouse, go to the ellipsis, and then I can click this share button. And you're going to see this start to light up on all kinds of different items inside of your Fabric workspaces. But now I can come in and I can put individual people that I want to grant access to be able to go to my warehouse here. So instead of giving them access to everything, I can say, you know what, I just want Brad to be able to read the data using the SQL endpoint inside of here. Or I can say that I want them to be able to read data with a SQL endpoint and be able to consume that data with Spark from the underlying Parquet files on top of that. So nice way that we're starting to enable some of the incremental data sharing and access controls and security model here inside of Fabric. You're going to see this expand greatly in the future. We're going to be able to do, you can already do like grant and deny in the T-SQL side of things to be able to refine access to individual tables or schemas and stuff in there. But this way you can share the individual warehouse with somebody and not have to go and give necessarily full workspace access to everything there. And there's, we've got it all in the docs that are ever changing about what each option is and the permissions that essentially go along with that versus what kind of workspace permissions overlap with each one of those. So be sure to check that out in the docs. I can throw a chat out or a link out there in the chat as well for folks later.
Absolutely. And you know what? We've actually got a video for this. So I will make sure that we throw in the description some of the links that we've talked about. We've got a video on data sharing that we did with a link to the documentation as well. But there's also some really cool options that were added for data warehousing as well to be able to give people different read-write capabilities. And the nice thing is that is also in the documentation. So people definitely want to go and check that out after the fact. But these are some great capabilities that we have. So next up, I am going to attempt to do something that might be rather difficult. We'll see how this goes with the demo gods. But there was a great blog written by Anshul Sharma, who is one of the program managers for Fabric, but he's specifically over in the KQL, in the Cousteau region. And he wrote a blog about how to be able to real-time monitor the IIS space station. Well, I did a series of videos on this, but there were a couple different things that we needed to do. And specifically what we're going to start out is we're going to start out using part of his GitHub repo, and we're going to create the logic apps to be able to make this work. So let me real quick, hold on. I need to shift something to a screen and then put that full size so that way we're not exposing anything that we shouldn't. And then I'm going to pull us back down. Okay, so I am in my Azure portal. I have created a logic app with a standard app plan. That's the only thing that you need to know. Other than that, I accepted all the defaults and I clicked next. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to generate workflows. I'm going to have to generate 2 workflows, and these workflows specifically are going to use some information from our Fabric, our Power BI, but our Fabric workspace as well. So let me switch over there real quick. This is going to be a little bit of juggling on my part. The first thing I'm going to do, I've created a new workspace for this, and there's a couple items that I've pre-created. I've created 2 event streams and a KQL database that we're going to use. I'm going to first go in and I'm going to get some information from my IIS location workspace. I'm going to click new source and I'm going to say custom application. We're going to enter this, and this can be any name that you want. Get logic app ISS loc. I'm going to add that. And it's going to add this resource, but the very important thing is what we get right down here. I'm going to focus on this real quick. We need our connection string primary. And what we're going to do is we're going to break this out a little bit so that way we can see how we're going to use it. When I click on the eye to reveal it, we want it to be an event hub. I'm going to click on copy the key. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up everybody's favorite tool, because we all use this no matter what, Notepad. And I'm going to paste this into the window. Now, there's a couple things that we need to understand. First off, this endpoint to right here, this is one of the first keys that we're going to use. We don't need, right up to the entity path. Sorry, right there. That's what we need. We don't need this semicolon, but we do need this entity path. This is essentially the name of the event hub that we will be utilizing within the Logic app. So I'm going to move this to another screen, but I'm going to say, remember this. And then this is the endpoint. This is going to be the connection key that we will actually be using as I configure my Logic app. So real quick.
It's like whenever you take the shared access signature and you have to remember to take off the question mark off the beginning. And
absolutely. No, you're 100% right. So I'm going to create a new, and I'm going to say stateful. The reason it's stateful is I'm going to be using some code from the GitHub repository that was put together for this. And I'm going to say, we're going to call this ISS Loc August demo. I'm going to say create. And this will create the workflow for us. I'm going to click into the workflow. I'm going to go straight to the code. And then, right, let's see. Now I need to, let's see, where did I put that GitHub repository? There we go. Here's the GitHub repository. I went into Logic Apps. Now I'm going to go to Get IIS location. I'm going to say raw so I can get that code. I'm going to do Control-Alt, copy. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to paste this in place. Now you can see right here, there's the name. We're going to need to replace this because when I come back over to my designer, first I'm going to save. Send event. Come on. There we go. Okay, so it had an error, but that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to come into this send event, and I'm going to delete this. And we're going to add a new action. And I'm going to get an event hub send event. It automatically puts it right there. We're going to have to create a connection for this. So the name of the connection, I'll be honest, I'm just going to use our entity path. And this could be anything, but I'm just going to leave it here. Our connection string is this part of the key right here. I'm going to say create new. Now, the name of the event hub, I'm going to use the entity path again. So use that as a custom value. And then I need to add a content. And the content is actually going to be the body of the HTTP. So what we've got a reoccurring interval, and I'm going to change this to my time zone. Easter Island always throws me off. I think I'm there, but then I'm not. Eastern time, US and Canada. We're going to do a collection every 5 seconds. Here's my HTTP code. We're going to api.opennotify.org, iisnow.json. As a matter of fact, if we take this, if I add a browser, and I just throw it in there, you can see here is what we're going to get. This is the JSON data, and it's updated every 5 seconds. And this is the orbiting position of the IIS location. The send event is getting this as the body, and then right here, that's where we're sending this. So I'm going to save this workflow. Now I need to do the same thing for the astronauts as well. But what I need to do is I need to make sure that this is actually being sent. So I'm going to look at my run history, and you can see this was successful. So the good news is I'm in a state where this data is being sent. Now I'm going to have to go over and I'm going to have to configure this within my Fabric workspace. So coming back over to my event stream, there's a couple things that I'm going to need to do. Oh, you go away. I want to stay over here. So we're getting this data, but what I've got to do is I've got to configure my destination. We're going to go to a KQL database. The destination name is going to be the IISDB. The workspace is, this is actually going to be the August Fabric presentation. And then it's going to pick up the database I've already created, ISSDB. We're going to create and configure. And this is going to give me a couple options for us to be able to use. So the first thing that I need to do, and when this loads, is I need to be able to make sure that I'm pulling in this data, because we're going to get this, and I'm going to call this ISS_LOC for the location. That's my data connection. Once it verifies that, we're going to go through to the schema, and I'm going to begin making changes. Now, for the astronaut data, I'm going to have to do that a little bit different. We're actually going to add a parameter, but first I'm going to take us through the location. I've clicked next. As you can see, the default format that this is going to come in as is a TXT file, and we viewed the JSON string essentially coming in. Now, we're going to need to parse that out, because what we want is we want the JSON. So this is the information we're getting. So I'm going to change this to JSON. And you can see this looks really good, right? We've got some data in here, but we're not done, because you see this is still nested. So I need to change my nested levels to 2. And what this does is this gives me my IIS position longitude. And I'm just going to double check that the data type is real, because that's what I need it to be. And then the position for latitude, and I'm going to double check that the column type is real as well. Now, I also need to make one other change. This timestamp, this doesn't make a lot of sense if we're looking at a timestamp, right? Like if you look at this format, that doesn't look like a timestamp you typically use. The reason is this is a Unix timestamp. So first I've got to change this to a string so that I can actually do a data movement operation. And then I'm going to set up a mapping transformation. The mapping transformation is going to be date from Unix seconds. And so, because this is actually a Unix seconds that timestamp that is coming in from the IIS. And so if I update this, if you look at this, you can see there's my date time information that's coming through. So I can click next. It's going to validate that the IIS location is created. It's going to create the mapping IIS location information and the data connection. I'm going to go ahead and close that, and it's going to start to work on this data. Now, while it is working on that data, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to our workflows. I'm going to create a new workflow. I'm going to say ISS Astro_August demo. I'm going to say stateful, because we've got to create this for the astronauts as well. Now, remember, there's a couple things I've got to do. So I'm going to go into our Astro demo, but then I'm going to come back over to Fabric, because I need to not just be in the IIS loc, I need to have one of these event streams per streaming API source. So I'm going to come into here. I'm going to say custom application. ISS Astro demo. I'm going to click add, and same thing. I'm just going to repeat this real quick. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to get the connection primary key. I'm going to copy it. We're going to take this, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take that out of here. I'm going to take the entity path as well, because we're going to need that. I'm going to come back over to my workspace, and I'm going to go to code. And now I'm going to go to the GitHub repo one more time, but we're going to click back because we were on raw. And what I want to do is I want to get to the astronauts and I want to click raw. I'm going to grab this. We're going to save. It should generate the same error because, again, this isn't the event hub that we need to utilize for Fabric. I'm going to come over to Designer. I'm going to delete. I'm going to add an action. There we go. Send event. Now I'm going to change connections because you can see what it did was by default, it pulled in my old logic or my old connection to the other service bus. So we're going to come in here. And again, I'm going to use the same entity because these two will be different. Now, this could be a friendly name, so keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be what I'm using right here. Let me get my notepad back up. There we go. I'm going to get the connection string. Create new. Now, this is where we do need the name of the event hub. This has to be the name of the event hub. And we'll say that's a custom value. We're going to do content. And I'm going to get the content of the body. And again, this, we're going to change. Go back up to Eastern Time. This is the get astronauts portion of this code. So if I go back, and just take a look at this JSON, what I can see is here is the name of the people and the astronauts who are currently up there. And that's the data we're going to be getting, right? That's the data that we want to get, that we want to send over. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back to my overview and my run history. And hopefully this will run very, very soon. And I'll see that this is working and I'll have a green checkbox. If I don't have a green checkbox, I will do my best to fix that. There we go. Executed the trigger. Oh, and we're successful. Great. So now let me head back over to my Fabric workspace. Should have remembered that was going to happen. And I'm going to say my KQL database will be my destination again. And again, we'll say ISS DB. Presentation, IISDB, create and configure. Now we've got some slightly different steps that will go this time around. I'm going to say, I believe this is ISS. Now I am going to make a change here because I need to add some additional data. What I need to add is an event priority. And so this is actually information that could come in through an event hub. And this is so that way I understand the queue time, because the difference between the astronaut data and the location data, I want a series of data from the location. From the astronaut data, I really just need to get the latest and greatest. So I need to get a top, right? Or a max or some type of value. So that way I'm just pulling back one set. But to do that, I'm going to need this time string because this isn't in there. So I'm going to add the X opted in queue time. I'm going to click next, and this is going to be added to my JSON values. Now, again, it's going to come in as the default for text, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to validate that this is actually going to be JSON. Let's go ahead and change it to JSON. And I'm going to go over to the opt and queue, and I'm going to change the date time or change this value. And what I just want to make sure of is that this is already set to a date time value. I'm going to go next. It's going to start pulling in that data. And while the data connection is established and we wait for that data to stream in, if I go look at my stream for my IISDB, I can see that we're ingesting data and that data is beginning to stream in. Now, I'm going to continue with this in just a moment, but Brad, I think there was something else that you wanted to share before I do this. Is that right?
Yeah, I just want to keep an eye on the clock here. I know it's 1 after the hour. Which one?
Oh, do you want me to go ahead and keep going on this?
That's up to you. I'm good with
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah, so let's go ahead. I apologize. We're running a little long, so thank you to everybody who's hanging with us. So as you can see over here, here's our KQL database. I've got IIS Loc. I've got some data in here. There's a little bit in Astronauts that we can see by this, but it's a very tiny amount. So if I want to query my table, I can show the top 100 records. And I can see that this data is coming out just fine from Astronauts. We've got some table in here. I could also say, let's query data. And let's do it from IIS Loc. And I can see where this is coming. Now, if I save this as a query set, what I can do is I can actually run a couple queries in here. And I'm just going to show you how a couple of these look. So let me throw a couple here. The first one is, well, actually, let's start here. So let's take a look at Astronauts. IIS Astronauts. Oh, sorry. I forgot what I termed it myself. There we go. If we take a look at the IIS Astronauts, you can see here's the different astronauts that we currently have up in the IIS space station. If I look for the location, I can see where it is, and I can see this. Now, the really cool thing is I can run this, and I can actually see right now, here's the IIS space station, and it looks like it's gone from over the Philippines, and it's going over the Pacific Ocean right now. Really, really cool stuff. Now, if we wanted to, one of the things that we could do is we come back over to the GitHub repo. We could go to the Power BI report, and I'm just going to download the Power BI report, and we're going to say, open the IIS PBX file. Now, when we open this file, it's going to be a little bit broken, but we can fix this pretty quick. Because one of the things that we need to do is we're going to have to change some of the data connectors in here. And this is going to use some of the same information that we've previously already seen. So we're going to click Upgrade Maps. If you get prompted to upgrade maps, you can see the visual. We can't display this. The IIS, we've got some information, but we can't see this. So what we need to do is we need to go to Transform Data to make this work. And we're going to click on the source. And when we get the source, you can see here's my cluster. So what do we need to do to be able to make this work? Well, we're going to come back over to Fabric. I'm going to click on my KQL database. I'm going to get my query URI that we used earlier with Kusto Explorer. But now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put this in place. I'm going to say ISSDB because that's the name of our database. And then I think I need to just make sure that this query is correct. There we go. That's one of the 3 queries I was using. I'm going to sign in so that way we are secure. And there's my data. So for Get Astronauts, we're going to do very much the same thing. I probably should have just copied this to my friendly OneNote, so I'm going to do that real quick so I don't have to do this again. SSDB, and remember I changed this to IIS Astronauts, so let me change this. I'm going to click OK. We've got data. The URL for my cluster, I'm going to change that here, and then the IIS orbit. slightly change this one as well. And we've got our data. So now I can close and apply. This is going to take a second to refresh. Let's see. Oh, somehow I didn't fix this. So it looks like the demo gods bit me on this one. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I didn't think about this. If I didn't set up my KQL database as using direct query, going directly to OneLake, I'm not going to be able to pull in this data. So what I will tell you is I went through this in painstaking detail when we made the video of this. And so one of the things I did highlight is making sure when you provision that KQL database that you've selected that the data will be stored in direct lake, because this is a direct query. And so make sure you do that, but we'll include those links down below. And the next time I have to do this live and I provision my KQL database, I'm going to make sure and do that in advance. So yeah. Thank you so much for everybody who has hung on with us for so long. We really appreciate you. I know we're about 5 minutes over. Brad, any closing thoughts?
No, just lots of really cool, interesting, fun things coming into Fabric. I'm sure when we do this again in a month or two, we'll have a lot of other new cool things to show. Lots of videos I know you guys are doing in the meantime as new features come out as well. So looking forward to the next recap.
Absolutely. All right. Well, for Tales from the Field, for myself and Niraj Jafari, we want to thank you so much. Bradley Schaap from the Fabric Cat team, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all those questions that we were asked, and we appreciate the participation. This stream is going to be logged at the channel right afterwards. And if there are any questions, make sure and keep this going down in the comments, because we would love to hear from you. And any questions you have that we don't have a video for, we will make sure we get an answer for you, and perhaps a video as well. Thank you so much, everyone, and we hope you have a great day out there. Take care, everybody.
Don't expect greatness, do my best, man, I'll take it. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up.